Today we're going to make a lettering piece like this, and the idea is for it to look like it's actually real watercolors when in fact it's just going to be like a digital painting. So I'll go through step by step and show you how to create something like this. There's a color palette available in the About section. The link to it is there, so you can download the color palette if you'd like to make it the same way. There's also a few free brushes, so if you'd like to use the same brushes that I'm using, they're available for free. So be sure to click the link to check those out and to get all the supplies you need to make this project. And there's also a file that makes this background look like watercolor paper, so be sure to download that file as well. So let's create a new document and get started so I can show you step by step how we're going to make this. So I've made this document that's 4,000 by 5,000 pixels, and that's the size we'll be using today. Or if you'd like to use a different size, then that's fine too, just as long as it's a rectangular size. And I sometimes use 8.5 by 11. It kind of just depends how big you'd like to print it. As long as it's 300 dots per inch, it gets a pretty good resolution, whatever size you're creating it. And if you make it a higher resolution, like 600 dots per inch, you can print it double the size and it'll keep the integrity of like the lettering and everything. It'll make it look nice and crisp. If you wanted to add in the watercolor background, you have the file. If you just want to keep it like plain white paper, then that's fine too. Okay, so let's pull up everything we need here. So first we have the colors we're going to be using today. I've set mine as the default. If you'd like to keep it handy, you can just drag the palettes out and let it go to the side there. And then the brushes that we're going to be using today are the glaze, wet mop, alcohol chocolates, and maybe some salt. There's also one in the ink section that comes with the Procreate app called Dry Ink, and we'll be using that one to write our lettering out before we start coloring it with the watercolors. These 4 brushes are available for free if you click the link. You can download these ones for free, and these are ones that I made. So I hope you enjoy them. And then the palette is also available for free with the link, and I'll have the watercolor paper too. Before I dive into this, I sketch it out in my sketchbook. So I kind of like got the general idea of like the shape I wanted to use and like how I wanted my lettering to flow. It's not perfect because of course you need to like scoot things around and adjust it to get it just right. But this was just like, so I had an idea of where I wanted to go with it. I also like try to pick out like the keywords that I want to make a little larger, and then like the smaller phrases or kind of like accents that I can make a little bit small and put them in like banner ribbons or really little, and somehow like set them apart with these like dots or these little what are these called, like these like emphasis lines. So I kind of had an idea of where I wanted to go with it. Rather than redrawing the whole thing on my iPad, I took a photo of it, and then I'm going to import the photo into this canvas here, and then I have something to work from. So I suggest you do the same thing. If you're comfortable like just like sketching it out on your iPad and going from there, that's fine too. But for me, sometimes it's a little easier for me to use an actual pencil and paper. So insert a photo. Here's my picture I took of it. I'm going to make it fit to the screen by pressing this option on the bottom there. And then I don't like all this like extra stuff, so I tend to like cut all that off. So a quick way to do that is just like drag it up out of the border, and then whatever is missing is going to be cut off. Whatever's like not on your canvas will be cut off. And another thing you could do is just use your selection tool and then use the rectangle and copy and paste it that way. But this works for me. So now I have this, and then to get it kind of like, I don't want it to completely fill the canvas, so we could start with that to push fit the screen, and then kind of just like adjust it a little bit. I don't want it to be all the way to the edges because I want to have some flexibility with printing this or like resizing and that kind of thing. So I want to leave like a border around the outside so that I have some leeway. And then the other thing is this is like pretty dark. I don't really like to work from a sketch that dark. So I'm just going to take it down a little bit and put it on multiply so that I can always see it if I'm coloring under it or whatever. And I think that's a pretty good sketch to work from. So then I started by putting in my lettering first. And for that, I was using the dry ink brush. So that's what we'll use. And I'm going to do it all in black for right now. We don't need to color anything yet. So I'm going to grab my black and grab your dry ink brush right here. I like to start with the biggest lettering or the biggest word and kind of work things around it, and make sure you make a new layer on top of your sketch. Actually, I'm going to put the sketch on top. And then that way you're drawing in a new layer. You don't want to be drawing on your sketch, and check it before you start because it's like a nightmare if you trace the whole thing and then it's on the wrong layer, which I've done. So I always try to remember to look to make sure it's a new layer. So then you're just going to get it pretty well the way you like by tracing over this, and you can adjust things as you need to. You can kind of thicken up your lines if you need to. This isn't necessarily like a calligraphy brush, but I do like it. So it responds to pressure, so it does get wider when you push harder, but sometimes it's not really wide enough. But you can always like go back through and kind of fake it by thickening up your downstrokes, and that kind of makes it look a little bit more like it's a brush pen or a calligraphy pen or whatever. Okay, so we have our first word in there, and then I think I want to keep this the same size, so I'm going to work on the word share and world, because to get these ones I might need to make it a little smaller. Another thing I should mention is I like to kind of work, well, right now it's at 13, but generally I'll keep it at a number I can kind of remember. I like to do like by 5s or 10s, so I'll usually put it to like 20 or like something that's easy to remember, so that when I need to go back and make something else that's the same weight, then I can remember easily that okay, it was set to 20. If it's like an arbitrary number that you're just like sliding up and down, it's hard to get it back to the same exact thickness. So that's just a tip. In this case, I forgot to check. So it's at 13. So I just have to remember that all of my words that are a little thicker are at 13. Okay, so that's pretty good. So then I'll do the next biggest words, and I think I can keep it at the same size because you can just not press as hard. And I want these ones to be a little bit more uniform anyway. We'll come back to these areas here with like the ribbon and stuff. And another thing is, you know what I should have done? I kind of like to put these ones on a different layer, so you can kind of scoot them up or down or whatever as you need to. So I'll probably have to go back and get these all on their individual layers, just so you can have a little more flexibility with like arranging it exactly the way you like it. But I forgot to do that. So that would be a suggestion, is to draw each word on its own layer, and then once you like it, then you can flatten it down. So for right now, I'm just going to keep going and create new layers from this point on, and then we'll come back and I can get them all on their individual layers. Okay, so let's do, let's go up here to the word so, and then this word to will have to be in a little further, and we'll get our flowers arranged around it. Since that's on its own layer, I know it needs to be like scooched over a little bit there, and it's really easy to do that. Not crazy about the word gift. I'll probably redo that one, make it a little thicker to kind of be more consistent with the two. But for now, I'm just going to keep going and do this part here. So this, I'm not great drawing in a straight line, so I need a guide. So I don't have one there. I'm just going to make one. And what I'm going to do for that is just use the sketching pencil, make a new layer, and then just draw a straight line across, hold until it creates a perfect line. It's not like wiggly from your hand shaking or whatever. And then take another finger and press down, and it makes it perfectly horizontal. And I do another one for the top. Exactly the same method. So now I have a little guide. Take that down a little bit and then make a layer on top of it. You don't want to write your word in the guide, or it's all going to be glued together and then you're stuck with it. So make sure you make a new layer. And then I'm going to write this part by using my new guide. Switch back to the pen you were writing with, and then it's good to go. And for this, if you wanted your letters to be like perfectly vertical and horizontal and like perfectly straight lines and consistent and everything, you can just do the trick where you draw it and then hold your pencil. Sometimes I'll do that. Most of the time, I kind of like the look of it being handwritten, where it's not necessarily all perfect, perfectly straight and everything. So I'll go with that. But if my hand's a little jittery or something, like I feel like it is now, then that trick is really helpful. If you drink too much coffee, you can use that and it keeps your lines all nice. And another thing you can do is streamline your brush. So if you have trouble with making like nice smooth lines when you're lettering, you can just turn up your streamline, and then it makes the lettering much easier to keep it smooth and nice looking. Okay, so let's see, where are we? So now let's do these ribbon banners. I'm done with that guide, so I'm just going to get it out of there. And this obviously is not going to be like smashed into the word world. Okay, so let's go up to these ribbon banners here. Go in my new layer, and let's start with this banner up here at the top. So these can be really fun to add in as like just interesting little elements. They can be a little tricky, but they don't need to be like perfect banners or whatever. Like it's kind of, it depends what kind of look you're going for, I guess. But in this case, I kind of like it to be like, you know, so it looks like it has the right dimensions and stuff and the right perspective, but it doesn't have to be like absolutely perfect. The way I usually draw them, if I'm doing something really like sketchy and like doodly, I would just draw the two sides and then draw the arc on the bottom, draw a matching arc on the top, and kind of like bring these sides in so it looks like it's curled in like underneath, and then take these pieces out so they look like they're like flying out behind it. And I would leave it like something like that. It kind of depends if you want it to look see how there's like gaps and stuff. It depends if you care if it looks like messy like that, or if you want it to look like super smooth. If you want it to be something that's more polished, I guess maybe the word for it, then you can draw it by kind of like keeping continuous lines so it's all connected, because it's hard to get it to connect just right when you're lifting your pen. So you could start at the corner and then just imagine like a piece of ribbon flowing around. It's helpful if you already have a sketch and a guide, something like that. And you can see how it's much smoother. And then you'll need to do your top. So let's see, let's start with you really need to like zoom in and make sure this all meets up like that, like that. And then this part here, you want to go from the very corner and draw a straight line up. And from there, you could kind of like take it and arc it over. It's a little tricky for me to do it that way, but you'll see like what works for you. I tend to do the messier ones a lot, just because that seems like it's more my style. And then these are gonna match up again for the most part. And you can just draw it like that, or you could do a straight line. And that one's a little bit more like flowy. It kind of just depends what you're going for. I actually think I'm gonna leave this one here that has like the gaps and stuff because I like it like that. So that's gonna be my ribbon for the words I am. I'm gonna delete out this other one so I don't get confused. Okay, and then let's put our words in here. And of course you could make this say whatever you want. I'd love to see what you came up with. So if you make this and you want to share it, you can share it. If you're on Instagram, you can share it with me. You just tag me at my McDoodles and I'll be able to see it. I would love to see it. And if you do a different quote, I'm really curious too what all you guys come up with. Okay, so then we're gonna kind of do something similar here. I'm gonna turn off the word grateful just so I can kind of see what I'm doing because the F was in the way. Okay, so we need kind of like a wide ribbon for this. Okay. How did I do the ends up there? Okay, they're straight lines. So I'm just going to keep that consistent because there's already so much going on in this piece. Okay, so then this will come out like this. The spacing is always a little bit tricky on these two, so probably a better idea would have been to put the words in another layer, and then you can kind of like make it smaller, bigger, or adjust it left and right if you need to fit into your little ribbon, so it's even on both sides. But luckily mine worked out to fit in there pretty much just right for once, which is pretty rare for me. I mean, you always like misjudge my spacing and then I have to kind of adjust things or whatever, but it's fine if it's on here, it's easy. Okay, so there we go. What do we have left? Okay, so we have all the words. So then we can get started with our flowers and like the little accents. Like, let's add, we can add these little things in. Those. I'm gonna leave mine all in their own individual layers until I get the flowers worked in, and then flatten it down. But I do like to kind of keep it organized. So I'm gonna put all these into their own folder. So you just swipe right to highlight it, and then you can push group, and then I like to put them in little folders to keep track. So that's my lettering. And then we'll get going on our flowers. So now we're gonna draw in our flowers, and we're just gonna draw it in black ink just like we did before, and we'll make a new layer to draw it in over top of our sketch. I'm gonna grab the dry ink brush again, that's in the inking section, and we'll use that. If I really wanted to, I could use my select tool to kind of grab some areas that need to be adjusted a little bit and move things around to fill the space a little better, like here. And then I scoot these out if I need to and just adjust things as I need to. But for now, I think I'm just gonna go with the sketch layer that I have here. And you can always add things in or remove them as you need to see how it fills in the white space. So I made a new layer. I'm gonna draw my flowers in this new layer and just fill in the space as needed. So I wanted to start with this leafy part up here, and I wanted to kind of flow nicely like a wreath almost. So I'm going to just make this arced, And to make the lines perfectly arced, I'm going to use Procreate to help me draw the line to make it a nice curve. So you draw the curve and then hold your pen down and it'll make a perfect arc, and that's really helpful. So now we'll do our flowers, and I would like to make a stem that kind of curves up and then down, and just kind of accentuates the words. Okay, and then this one. And I just like to make them real messy and loose. But make them how you wish. It's your piece of art. It's really easy to draw them this way, and I just like how it looks overall. Okay, so we've got that, and then we can add in, like, you can go back in later and like fill in white gaps that need to be filled as you see like where you're gonna have to add things and like fill in white space. But since I know I wanted those hearts, I'm just gonna go ahead and add them now. Okay, so there's our first one. That's the one that's kind of curving up. We don't really have room to do the same thing, so I'm just gonna kind of have one go like to the side. Something like that. And then I want to fill in like the little white space with some little hearts. And then make one more layer here. And those will be like our loose roses. So I'm just going to do a few of those down here. And that kind of like fills in the area at the bottom, but also keeps the same kind of flower going, like the same theme, so it looks like it blends well. And then you can kind of see where you need to add leaves and hearts or whatever you're going to use for your filler to fill in the gaps. At this point, this sketch is distracting, so I'm going to turn it off there. There we go. And you can kind of just add things where you feel like it needs a little more. So just gonna add some like little hearts throughout it. Okay. Don't forget to put your name, your initials. Okay, so I think that I'm gonna work with that. I'm not gonna mess around with it too much more. Let's make sure we got everything. That looks good. So I'm gonna put these into their own group and name those flowers. And then it's all organized, and then we'll be coloring next. So go ahead and export this as a PNG, because we're going to be doing something else with it in a later tutorial. So I'm going to save it to my camera roll, or you can save it to your files. You could also just go back out into your Procreate gallery and then just swipe to the left and push duplicate, and then you'll have an extra one, because we're going to do something fun with it in our tutorial in the coming weeks. Okay, so now it's time to color. I think what we'll do first is put our watercolor paper in, because when you're coloring on top of it, you can really see the texture and like how you might need to adjust your colors depending what effect you want. So I have all of the groups organized here. I'm going to go ahead and delete out the sketch layer because we don't really need that anymore. And then go over to the bench, press add, and whether you saved to the paper as a file or a photo, depends how you imported it. Mine happens to be in the photos. So here it is. I'm just gonna go ahead and add that in. It's already set to the full screen, yeah. And then I'm gonna turn it to, so there's a few ways you could do it. You can either keep it on top and you're going to set it to multiply, and you can see how the lettering underneath is going to show through now, and it picks up, it's hard to tell because it's black, but it's going to pick up a little bit of the texture there. I think that's how we're going to go ahead and do it for today. There are a few other ways that I like to do it where it really like pulls out the texture of the paper, but for now let's just stick it in as a multiply layer, and then we're going to color underneath of it. So if you're happy with your design like this, then you can go ahead and flatten things down if you need to save layers. On this particular iPad, let's see how many layers I have. I think I have 22 layers available. This is an iPad Pro. I know with a smaller iPad, you are restricted on the number of layers depending how big your canvas is. I used to work with much less layers on my other iPad, and it is tricky. You have to kind of be strategic about how you use them. So let's see. Yeah, so I have 11 layers left, which is plenty. But because I want to be able to color straight through and not have to go for each individual section, I think I am just going to go ahead and flatten it down. The only thing I'm going to leave, well, I was going to say the only thing I'm going to leave unflattened are the words inside of these banners, but it looks like I did not create a new layer for those. So I am going to pull those out and put them on their own layer just so that I can color them a little differently. So I'm just going to use my select tool and just pull them out to their own layer. So you can just select that. You can hit this circle if you need to add more to your selection, then you can. You hit that circle and then swipe 3 fingers down. I'm just gonna cut and paste. Now that's on its own layer. And there's a reason for that. I wish I would have mentioned to you to make it on its own layer when we were drawing it. But if that happened to you too, you can either put it on its own layer or it's no big deal if you don't. Because when we color it, there's ways around it. It's okay, it's just easier this way. So I'm gonna cut and paste that. Okay, so for those two, I'm gonna scoot those up and then flatten. See everything except for that. I want these to stay black, which is why I want them to be separate, because I want it to look like you did it with like a micron pen. So I'm going to keep those separate, and everything else I'm going to go ahead and flatten down. You can do it by either you can do like merge down one at a time, or you can just grab all of the layers you want to be merged and just snap them together, and then that is all merged down. And that's as much as I want to merge well, I guess I can merge these because they're all going to stay the same black color, like they're inked. And then the flowers, I think we can just go ahead and merge everything. I might keep those leaves, these ones, separate because I'm going to probably keep those mostly green. And then these ones are all flowers and stuff, so that can go together. Okay, so we're still pretty organized here. Let's start with the lettering, everything except these ones. And you're going to make a layer above and then make it into a clipping mask. And then grab your, you can either use the glaze or the wet mop. I think I'm going to go with the glaze. And I'm going to choose this blue. Okay, one last thing. Before we do that, we need to make these lighter, because if you start trying to color over it, it's already black. So I'm just going to go ahead and make them white, which is difficult to, obviously, to see now. So I'm just going to turn the background off and that layer off just for a sec. So then I can see what I'm doing, and I'm going to grab this glazed pen with that dark color of blue. So now I'm just going to kind of like swipe through to do like the first pass on the color. And you can see how it kind of like just flows the paint in there. And since we made those letters inside the banner on their own layer, it makes it so much easier because you don't have to worry about trying to like carefully go around. If you want them to be colorful, then that's cool too, but I wanted mine to be black. Okay, so we did like our first swipe through there. I'm going to move that so I can have more space. And then as you add more, or if you press down, You can kind of get the paint to spread and darken and give it this nice like watercolory type of feel. Just lift your pen often and kind of like swipe in your color. If you really want to be like super precise, you have like a dark area there, you want to mimic real watercolors, it would flow like into the other areas. So you can kind of like gently push it into the other areas to make it look like the real deal, but I'm not going to be that particular with this. And then if you have areas that are dark, that I'm not that crazy about, you can just grab your smudging tool, hold down, and it'll smudge with the current brush. And I'm just going to kind of like push this color around to make it more blended. And you can do that any areas that you're not like happy, if there's like a big dark blob or whatever, you can kind of smooth it out a little bit. So I'm just going to put that blue on all of this area that looks white right now. And in a sec, I'll turn back on that watercolor paper so you can see what it looks like with that. There we go. We don't really need to turn the background back on because the paper is covering anyway. So you can see how it's like bringing a little bit of the texture through. There's ways to bring more through, but for this tutorial, we're just going to stick with setting it to multiply to just bring a little bit through. And if you saved your lettering as a PNG file or duplicated it in your gallery, we're going to use it again, and we'll go through another way to make it look like it's on watercolor paper with a little bit more texture. So that looks pretty. If you'd like to add a little bit of some of the other colors, that could look really nice too. So I'm going to grab like a little bit of this green and just stick in the same layer that's clipped down to the lettering, and just add a little bit here and there. I'm going to actually turn the opacity down there just to make it like not so intense. And I feel like that looks really pretty too, and it has kind of like a blend. Okay, so we're good to go with the letters in the banners because we left it alone. If you clipped it all down, you can just go ahead and just carefully color over it with the black and this other pen, the mop brush. That works really well for that, to just kind of like capture it and not go all over the edges and stuff. But since I could put it in a different layer, we're done with this part. Okay, so we'll do the same thing. We're going to put a layer above the leafy stuff and a layer above the flowers and clip it down with the clipping mask, and then go ahead and color in those layers. For the leaves, I do kind of want the green. The first thing we need to do again is to lighten it up. So I'm going to take the layer with the leaves, go to the brightness, and just crank it all the way up to white, which now you can't see, but once you start coloring over it, it'll be obvious where it is. And since it's not all clipped down with these flowers, you're only going to be coloring the leaves, so it's not a big deal to so you don't have to keep like turning this off and on, all the background layers and stuff. So I'm just going to color in the clipping mask that's over top of the white leaves, and they'll start to shine through. Let me make sure I'm not using the right brush. I want to use this glaze brush. I thought it looked weird. And you can see how it's just like a light glaze coming through. I hope you can see that there. And then you can kind of just like swipe in more color, just a little bit. Darken it up in some areas. Just make it really like blotchy and stuff to give it that watercolor feel. And same for this side. And if you want, you could add in a little bit of the blue or something just to like make some areas real pretty, like the color is blended in. And I like that. And let's move on to the flowers. We need to make them white. Now that is kind of hard to see, and I don't necessarily want the stems all muddied up, so I'm going to turn off the watercolor paper and the background color, which is white, so I can kind of see what I'm doing at first. So I'm going to go to the layer that's clipped down to the flowers and grab some pink and start with these hearts here. Add a little red, maybe like in the tips, and just kind of look like it's bleeding in there. It's really easy to add color with this brush too, because you can just like press down and it kind of just flows in like you're really painting. And you like wet your paper and then drop the color in, and it just kind of bleeds to the wet areas. This brush kind of does that, so it makes it easy to paint quickly. There we go. And maybe make the center a little darker and do the same thing over here. And one thing I noticed is the opacity's turned down a little bit, but that's okay. I'm not gonna mess with it because I want it to all be a little kind of consistent. So I'm just gonna leave it the way it is since that's how I've been painting. But that might be why it played on like so light at first, but I kind of like that. I like to start with like a little bit and then you can always add more as you see how it looks and adjust things. And don't forget your paper is white, so it's okay to have like some kind of like lighter areas. Okay, that's looking pretty good. Let's do this one. Okay. And I'm okay with like a little bit of pink in those leaves like that there. I guess in real life, if you were really painting, it wouldn't really be because they're not touching, so the color wouldn't really bleed over into them, but I'm okay with it in this particular project. Okay, I think that's all of the flowers. Let's just grab a little red. Oops. And then maybe that heart. All right, and then we have our leaves. So I'm gonna do the green and probably add a little bit of like that dark blue in also. And this, I'm just gonna kind of push the color up towards the flower because that would bleed into each other in real life. And that is a flower. So let's grab that one. And then what do we have left? This side over here. Kind of just push the color up in to there. I'm excited to see what it looks like when we turn our watercolor paper back on, because that really makes it have like the full effect. It's always interesting to see how it looks with the background, the texture, because then it really looks like you painted it. So let's see, that's pretty good. Some of these are a little light, so you can tell once you turn it back on where you need to add a little more color or whatever. Maybe I'll turn this up now just to get like a little bit of a brighter hue there. Okay, I like that. This one is like a little bit of a light area. Okay, I think that's good. So now I wanted to add a little bit of like a blue wash to the background. So I'm gonna put it all the way in the bottom, but I can't do that without going to the last layer and then like scooting it down there. So I'm gonna grab the lighter blue here. I think I'll stick with my glazed brush and then just really like put a wash all over. Let's see, maybe if we put it like that. And then I'm gonna leave it more like lighter in the center. Okay, so I'm gonna reduce that a lot on the opacity on that particular layer. Something like that. And then we're gonna duplicate it and erase parts out to make it really look like kind of like uneven, like a watercolor painting would. So let me duplicate, oopsies, let's duplicate it by swiping to the left and then just push duplicate. And you can see how it made it a little darker. But I want to erase parts out. So I'm going to erase like little bits from this one using the same brush. Let's just make sure. I always make sure because I don't want to erase with a different brush. I know it doesn't always take. So then I'm just going to kind of like swipe around back and forth and erase pieces out. Let's get rid of that. And if this isn't as big as you'd like, you can go in and adjust it. So just go into the properties, and then the maximum size right now is 132. I'm just going to put it higher because I want to be able to do like a big wash with like a really big brush. Like even that's not big enough. Let's just put it the whole way because you can always turn it down over here. So I just want to erase out like kind of towards the middle to get that lightened up and make like almost like a vignette. And then this one under here too. And that's better. So you can see how it kind of like fades out and then the edges are darker. And if you want to make it more intense around the edges, you can just keep duplicating your layer. And you can see how the edges got a little darker, and then you could just like take a little bit out to kind of make sure it gets blended in good. But I like it like this. So once you have it how you like, you can also, I should mention, you can adjust these different effects. So you can do multiply or color burn or whatever, but for now I'm just going to leave it as normal. And then I'm going to flatten those 3 layers together because I'm happy with how this came out. I'm going to make a new layer on the top of that, and then I'm going to grab those brushes that are the salt and the alcohol droplets. So I'm going to put drops of alcohol on top of that wash. If you've done that with your real watercolors, you know it like spreads it out. It repels the paint. So that's going to have that kind of effect here. Since it's a layer on top of that blue layer, let me just show you. It's not going to lighten it, so you need to choose white. But if you're doing it directly on the layer, you can just drop it and it'll lighten little spots. It's kind of hard to see, but you can just drag it around and it's going to put like the spots. This is such a light layer that it's really hard to see it there, but it's like making these droplets and like repelling. So I'm going to put it on top of that layer though. So let me just take that back out. Okay, and it's still white, so that's good. Let me just zoom in a lot here so to kind of show you. You can see these circles here. Those are your alcohol droplets. It's very difficult to see because the background is so light. So it's a very subtle effect in this case, but I still want to add it just because I think it's pretty. And if you want to make it brighter, you just keep duplicating it, and you can merge these down, just the alcohol layers. There we go. And if you needed to duplicate it again, and now you can see it is much easier to see. That's actually a little too much for me, so I don't want to make it that intense. So I'm just going to leave it like this. And you could also change your blend modes to kind of make it show up more or have different effects. Like now you can really see. I press lighten and you can see where the droplets are. But for me, I'm good with the normal mode because I just wanted to be really subtle. And then you can also grab your salt And if you've done watercolors, when you sprinkle salt, you can suck up some of the color off the paper and then you let it dry. And when you brush off the salt, it leaves like this really pretty speckly effect. And I thought that might be kind of fun too. So I'm gonna grab the salt brush and just put a little bit of salt in. You can see it like drops these, well, like a salt shaker would. And it's really subtle as well. And then I think I'll put it on top of this blue, just a little bit. And you can see it's adding like a little bit of that speckly texture. And that looks really pretty, I think. And in real life, when you do that and you like wipe the salt away, it also makes your painting all glittery, which is fantastic, I think. Okay. And you can also adjust it to make it like fine salt or coarse. I have it like somewhere in the middle there. So we're almost finished. The last thing we need to do is just add a little bit of accents, like some line shading and some line work around the letters. So to do that, I'm going to put a layer all the way at the top. I'm going to choose my dry ink brush. And then this light blue color. I'm just going to add a little bit of like the line shading in the ribbon banners and around the lettering. So when I'm doing the lettering, I try to pick a direction and just like stick with it to make it look realistic. So I have to remind myself as I'm going. Usually I go to the right of the line of the lettering and of the object and underneath. So when I'm doing my shading, it helps me to remember where to put the lines and stuff if I just keep reminding myself to the right and underneath on every single piece. And as I go through, I say that in my head and it keeps me on track with like how to put the shading in the right direction. So that's hopefully a helpful tip. If you noticed, I left off the shading on this word. This has been bothering me that this is like squished in. It's not really the way I would typically do my lettering. It's kind of hard for me to draw at a certain angle with like a camera above me and everything. So I'm going to go ahead and adjust that, and I'll show you how. We're going to take these two layers. Because this is the color that's clipped down to the word, I want it to move with the word, especially since I did like some darker areas and stuff like that, that if I move my letters, these aren't going to line up. So I want to keep that along with it. So I'm going to swipe to keep them together, swipe to the right to highlight them both, and then I'm going to select over this word here so I can adjust it a little bit. So I'm just selecting in pieces because this banner is connected to the word and I don't want to adjust the banner. I just want to adjust my word. So I think I have what I need selected there. So then you can use this arrow tool and that should grab just the word there. So because my lettering is black, it's not showing up. I can't see it when I'm going to adjust it. So I'm going to change it. I mean, because it's white. So I'm going to change it back to black just for now so I can see what I'm doing. I still have it selected. And I'm going to make sure I have both of those layers so I can grab them together. There we go. And then I'm just going to use this down here where it says distort. I don't want to move it. I don't want to adjust it in a uniform way because it's just going to make it bigger and smaller. But it's going to keep, like how this is scrunched in, it's going to keep that. So I want to be able to like stretch it out. So I'm going to use this one that says distort. Actually, I'm going to use warp because I just kind of want to grab like that A and just kind of mess around with it and see what how we can adjust it a little bit. Okay, let's see. I think that might be a little bit better. I didn't like how the A was so like narrow. I would like it to be more like rounded. I think that looks a little better. I should have adjusted it all before I went ahead and colored, but you can always kind of do things after the fact too if you get creative and kind of find ways to work around it. I just want to make sure my banner is still connected there, and that looks good. So I think I'm just going to go with that. And then I do like that a little bit better. So this doesn't really matter because this is clipped down. The word grateful is now in black lettering. If you turn this off, you can see it's black and the rest is white, but it's okay because we use the clipping mask. If you're doing like the alpha lock thing to color it in, then you want to make sure that it's white. So when you color over top, you get your true color. But since we're using a clipping mask, it doesn't matter what color the lettering is underneath. So it doesn't matter what color that is. So it doesn't matter that it's black. So I'm just going to leave that alone. I think I like that like it is. And it looks like the banner pretty much lines back up. I guess maybe I should just like fill that little piece back in to make sure that it's all cohesive. Oopsie days. There we go. So we can just color it back in because it's a clipping mask of all of this paint clip down. It'll fill it in. So as you're coloring, it's going to fill it back in with the color because it's all clipped together. If that makes sense. Okay, so I think that part's good. So then now I can add in my shadows on that word now that I'm more happy with it. Okay, I think we got all of our areas. So this is the final piece, and I hope you enjoyed this. If you share yours, and I would love to see it, and I hope this was fun for you. I look forward to seeing you next time when we do this whole piece in a new way, and I'll see you then. For more fun projects like this, be sure to subscribe and hit the bell to receive notifications when there's a new video. Thanks for watching!